Hi, this video is going to go over some interest problems. And before we jump into the first problem, I want to just remind you that the formula to find interest is principal times rate times time, or I equals PRT. Now you can see by the buckets that I have written below, we're going to do these a little bit different than we have other number problems. We will have a bucket that stands for the interest, another bucket that stands for the interest, and then our third bucket will be the total interest. So my equation is going to be interest plus interest equals total interest, and we're going to find that interest by using buckets. Now within each bucket is going to stand for one of the accounts, whether it's a loan interest account or whether it's a savings account. The buckets will stand for interest. So in the bottom of each bucket, we're going to put the amount of money that we have in that account. In the middle, we're going to put the rate, and on the top, we're going to put the time. Now, most problems will have the time as the annual interest, which means it will be 1 year. But if it's something other than that, we need to put it in our bucket. So let's take a look at our first problem. Okay, here's our first problem. Chris invests the same amount of money in two accounts. One pays 5% annual interest and one pays 7% annual interest. If the total annual interest earned is $36, how much was invested in each account? Now you can see by how I've set this problem up that step 1 is the same. Write down what we're trying to find. But then on step 2, instead of let statements, we're going to draw buckets. Remember that each bucket actually stands for interest. So in the bucket, I'm going to put the principal, the rate, and the time. Alright, so I have one account that pays 5% interest, one that pays 7% interest, and the one that pays 5% is an annual interest rate. So that's annual. Annual, that means the time is 1 for both of those. And the amount that I have, because I have invested the same amount in each, the amount that I have goes in the bottom of the bucket, and it's X and X because it's the same amount in each account. Now in the third bucket, we generally are going to put the total interest. Now the total interest is $36, so I'm going to put $36. Now for step 3, to get my equation, all I'm going to do is multiply my buckets. If I multiply this bucket, I get principal times rate times time. I get 1 times 0.05 times X plus 7%, my time is 1, my amount is X, so 0.07X, and that equals $36. Alright, now before I do any more on this problem, I think what I'm going to want to do is multiply all the way through this problem by 100 so that I can move the decimal points over. So you can see what I've written in red there. I multiplied through both sides of the equation by 100. And when you multiply by 100, you need to move the decimal point over 2 places, which this gives me a 5, this gives me a 7, and here I would need to add 2 more, or put 2 more zeros on the end to get my 3600. So now my equation is 5x plus 7x equals 3600, which is pretty easy to solve. I get 12x equals 3600. I'm going to divide by 12, and I end up with x equals 300. Okay, what was that? That was the amount in each account. So that's my step 4. Step 5. Okay, my conclusion is that Chris invested $300 in each account. Now I did put something else in here just for you to take a look at. When you do a check, you can kind of just do it over to the side. Make sure your answer makes sense. If I run my principal times rate times time, for the first account I get $15 interest. Principal times rate times time in the second account, it gives me $21. So altogether I get $36, which is what I was supposed to get. So my problem is done, and I get $300 in each account. Okay, let's look at the next one. Mrs. Jones invested $10,000, some at 5% and some at 6%. If her combined annual interest is $575, how much is invested at each rate? Well, the first thing we can do is put the total interest over here. That's $575. I have a 5% interest rate and a 6% interest rate. Because of the word annual, I know that my time is 1 for both of those. And the other information I have is that I've got a total of $10,000. So if I put X in the first box, the second box must be 10,000 minus X. That's the way you set it up whenever you have the sum of two numbers equaling, say, 10,000. It would be X and 10,000 minus X. Okay, now for my equation, I'm going to multiply the buckets. 1 times 5% times X. So 0.05 times X plus 0.06 times 10,000 minus X equals 575. Okay, now I will also, as I did in the last problem, I'm going to multiply all the way through by 100. Now notice that in this second quantity, I already had a product, 0.06 times this quantity. So when I multiply 100, I multiply into that quantity. I don't multiply all the way through. So what I end up with is 5x plus 6 times the quantity, 10,000 minus x, equals 575 with 2 zeros on the end of it, 57,500. I needed to multiply the 100 times this 0.06, but not all the way through. Now if that's confusing for you, then go ahead and clear the parentheses first and then multiply all the way through by 100. Okay, I'm going to continue solving this problem. Alright, you can see I've solved the equation and I ended up with x equals 2,500. That means to find the other amount I would take 10,000 minus 2,500 to get 7,500, and here's my conclusion. Therefore, she had 2,500 invested at 5% and 7,500 invested at 6%. Here's our next problem. Ruth borrowed $2,000, part from each of two different sources, for a 6-month period. One charged 6% interest and the other 8%. When she paid them off, she paid a combined interest of $68. How much did she borrow at each rate? Alright, first of all, we're going to put our account interest rates in each bucket. My total interest was $68. In the bottom of the buckets, I don't know how much I have, but if I let X be 1, because they add up to 2,000, this one must be 2,000 minus X. And the other thing that's still missing, and that's a little bit different than we've done before, is the fact that this was a 6-month loan, not an annual loan. So in the top here, I need to put, I'm going to write it in decimal form, 0.5. I need a half of a year, that's 0.5, and that's what I have for my buckets. Now I need my equation. In looking at this with all these decimals, it might be helpful to multiply each term out first, and then we'll clear our decimals. Alright, when I multiply 0.5 times 0.06, I get 0.030, and that 0 after the 3 doesn't need to be written, and similarly for the 0.04. So at this point, I could multiply and clear the parentheses, or I can just go ahead first and multiply through by 100, all the way through, and that will move my decimal points over 2 places. So I have 3x plus 4 times this quantity equals 6,800. Now I'm going to finish solving this. Alright, you can see I've finished solving the problem. I multiplied through by 100, cleared my parentheses by doing my multiplication, combined like terms, subtracted and divided, and I got x equals 1,200. That means 2,000 minus x would be 800. Okay, that's my step 4. Now make sure that you get the correct ones together. 6% was the X number, 8% was the 2,000 minus X. So she borrowed 1,200 at 6% and 800 at 8%.